Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The Antyodaya Anna Yojana scheme, launched by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government in 2000, is aimed at the poorest of the poor in the country. This scheme, which covers over 20 million people, is apparently in the danger of being phased out if one goes by the Public Distribution System Control Order issued in March this year. This order, which seeks to curtail this scheme over a period, has also brought in certain conditions for its beneficiaries, which is seen by activists as illegal and also violative of the National Food Security Act. This order, which was actually issued in March, has come to notice only recently. The order raises many questions about its intentions as well as the larger issue of providing food security to the people. Today we will discuss what this order is all about and how it will affect the poor and the intention behind this order and what needs to be done to ensure the poorest of the poor don't suffer. To discuss this, I have with me Kirit Parekh, Chairman Irade and former Member Planning Commission, Gopal Krishna Agarwal, Member National Executive of the BJP, and Biraj Patnaik, Social Activist and Principal Advisor to the Supreme Court appointed Commissioners on Right to Food. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Parekh, when this scheme was actually envisaged and launched, what was the purpose behind it? What made the government then to bring about this kind of a scheme?
Yeah, the main thing was that it was felt that an Antyodaya scheme where you give assets to the poorest of the poor will make them independent. It is the same kind of an old idea that don't give people food but give them a fish net so they can fish and feed themselves. So the whole idea behind the Antyodaya scheme was to identify the poorest of the poor and then give them means of livelihood. And this used to be, milk animals and or sewing machines and things of that kind. Often, however, the experience has been that the poorest people do not have the necessary skills or ability to benefit from some of these programs or some of these assets given to them. And therefore, I think there has been often questions raised about the effectiveness of the Antyodaya program. Because often when people go and see afterwards, what are you doing with the buffalo that was given to you, then they often find that the buffalo is not there and that it has gone out to graze. So things of that kind were very common because poor people who got the buffaloes did not have the ability to feed, milk and market the product and benefit from it. So I think that was one of the problems with this scheme. I don't know what the latest status of this is, but I think if we have replaced it with a right to food program, I think that would certainly make some sense.
This was replaced with the right to food program. Biraj, would you like to elaborate on this?
I think we're getting slightly confused here. The Antyodaya Anna Yojana was always a part of the public distribution system. It was started by the Vajpayee government and it was a program that Mr. Vajpayee himself had personally sort of fostered over the years and the UPA continued it. This provided 35 kilos of food grains at 1 rupee per kilo to the poorest households in the country.
So the households?
To poorest households, 35 kilos, irrespective of the size of the household. This was for old people, disabled people, people without any means of support, urban homeless, people who have no means of livelihood and cannot earn a livelihood or who cannot go to the NREJ work site. So really the poorest of the poor. And this scheme was merged into the National Food Security Act because when the act was made, it was felt that while priority categories would get 5 kilos per head per month because they would have other sources of livelihoods, for the poorest of the poor, and it was not a large number, just 2 crore people, 20 million households in the country, the poorest of the poor, they would continue to have this benefit. Now, what the government is saying now,
there's an order which has been issued.
PDS control order, absolutely, you're right. Absolutely. Now, the first part that the PDS control order is saying is that we will phase out this program, which means that if there is a dropout from this program, state governments are not allowed to add a new household in its place, and instead they will be merged into the priority category. So in a sense, you are reducing the numbers of people over time, and then gradually this program will be phased out. So the implication of that is that if I was a 3-member household, I was getting 35 kilos of food grains. When I'm phased out and a new household, because there will always be old people, there will always be persons with disabilities.
People will get older also.
People will get older as well. There will always be a fixed percentage which is with disabilities and so on. They will now get 15 kilos instead of the 35 kilos that they were getting. So that really is the crux of the issue here. And there are other issues that will come to associated with this.
Mr. Agarwal, what is the intention of
I think,
trying to... Yes, Mr. Parekh.
Yeah, I was referring to an Antyodaya scheme which was started some years ago, and this is the Antyodaya Anna Yojana.
Yeah.
I agree with it that yes, Antyodaya Anna Yojana gives food to people, and I also agree that making it such that you cannot add new people who become deserving is a mistake.
Okay. Mr. Agarwal, what is the intention behind this order, which is obviously aimed at phasing it out at some point of time? And also there are other aspects to this order we will come to, like, talking of citizen, not a resident.
Yeah, because I don't think you are, if we go too deep in read between the lines, that is some sort of thing that is happening. I think what the government's intention is that ultimately down the line we have to move to direct transfers to the accounts, because we have opened a Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, and finally all the subsidy, the government's plan is to go directly through the banking channel. There were large scale leakages in the whole system. If you go on to the CAG report over the past several years, there were 26 social security schemes at various levels announced by the government, mostly by the UPA government. And CAG report says out of those 26 schemes, 25 schemes had seen large-scale corruption, leakages, and therefore there was a big problem in the whole system of transfers of these subsidies and other things. So I think there is down the line this feeling or this line of action that we are taking. Otherwise, you see, then counter, we have several schemes come out. Even we are strengthening public distribution system. You see the Chhattisgarh government, Raman Singh government has done very good on the public distribution system. Even to the farmers with regard to minimum support price, government has done several steps by either increasing the minimum support price or increasing the compensation thing, and their stand on the WTO with regard to minimum. So everything you have to see in the overall picture.
In the overall picture. Well, overall picture.
Let the facts come out. Now the fact is, there is no reading between the lines. It says no new Antyodaya household shall be identified in the state, and the total number of Antyodaya households shall be reduced to that extent. PDS control order of the government. So there is no ambiguity. Number one. Number two, I think there is a tendency in this government to respond to every question by saying Jan Dhan. Okay, I agree. Let's say that we won't give food grains, we'll give Jan Dhan. What is the quantum of entitlement under Jan Dhan? Jan Dhan will, if it happens, and the government has not made any announcement of replacing in-kind subsidies with cash, but even if they do, the quantum for these families should have been at the rate of 35 kilos. Exactly. And then how do you inflation index it? So all those problems are there. The only point of agreement that I'll have with Mr. Agarwal is that on WTO, of course, government has taken a very progressive stand, but this goes back against the principle of food security. He refers to the Chhattisgarh model, and as you know that I have worked on the Chhattisgarh model with the Raman Singh government for many years in Chhattisgarh, and that model exemplifies Antyodaya Anna Yojana. And the reason why Dr. Raman Singh brought down the price of food grains to make even BPL at the rate of Antyodaya is because there were a number of studies which showed that Antyodaya performs better than the BPL and APL. The maximum leakage is out of the APL, which the Food Security Act has eliminated, followed by the BPL. Antyodaya has the minimum amount of leakage. Government's own studies show that up to 95% of grain goes to Antyodaya households directly without leakage. And that's because in our society, even today, there is some shame in stealing from
the
widows
and,
the poor. And orphans and the disabled and the pregnant and nursing mother. There is still some shame. left in our social setup at the village level. So people don't steal from that. So I think
Yes.
Mr. Agarwal is contradicting
Now,
himself.
what I want to say is that I am not saying that Jan Dhan Yojana in itself is giving transferring to the people. It is creating an infrastructure, architecture through which the government plans to give subsidy.
No, the architecture is fine.
Even if you see this on the PAL scheme, you see there were 17 crore people connections, gas connections, which were getting
we are not
subsidy.
discussing. No, we are not discussing.
Ultimately, there is leakages in the
No, it is not a
system.
question of leakage. It is a question of intentions. Mr. Parekh, when the government says, or the government's representative here says that, Jan Dhan Yojana we will try to bring about, but the whole philosophy behind Antyodaya Anna Yojana was to provide for the poorest to the poor who may not have a Jan Dhan account at all.
Yeah, I will agree that yes, we must really give special consideration to the poorest of the poor. That is unquestionable. Then the question comes that do we give aid in kind
Or cash.
through cash?
Yes.
And I think we
And
have
target.
seen that yes, if you can give it through cash, that would be better and can be more effective. But one must clarify, one must be certain that you are reaching the poorest of the poor, even through, say, your direct cash transfer or so on. Once you can do that, then certainly I think it would be worthwhile to switch over to direct cash transfer, and you may also open at the same time some in special areas in remote villages, special fair price shops as well, from which people with their money can buy the food that they need. So I think it is not as if that you can do only one or the other. My feeling is, yes, you have to give special consideration to the poorest of the poor, but it is better to provide to the extent possible aid or help through direct cash transfer.
Okay.
Because of this only, just a second, because of this only, we are saying that we have not reduced the existing beneficiaries. It is only that
not
the new.
reduced it, but
No,
this is your own
we
order.
are restricting the new entrants.
We are-
to
we
the-
don't- you
This is your order.
Completely
No,
restricting the new entrant.
restricting the
apart
new
from that,
entrants.
apart from that, you say that this order is illegal. Why do you say it's illegal?
Well, the overall approach that the government has taken to the Food Security Act itself. Now, there are two illegalities involved. The first illegality is that the Act itself specifies the date of implementation. If you postpone
You're
or have
talking
to
of the National
change
Food
with
Security
that,
Act.
the National Food Security Act says that
Which
this
is
act,
still not fully implemented at all.
and it has been extended by executive orders.
Right.
When you have an act of parliament that gives a date of implementation, if you change that, it's an executive order. It will not suffice.
It was supposed to have been implemented
in
1 year.
September 2013.
In 1
By
year.
in 1 year.
That was
Exactly.
2012 it was passed.
Absolutely.
September
2013 it was passed. September it was
2014.
July 2014 it was supposed to be
July
done.
2014, yes.
Now, the second illegality, which is more serious, is that it violates Supreme Court orders, which are still valid despite the act being in place. And the Supreme Court is very clear. If you can just give me 1 second, I can read the order. In 2001, they gave an order. In 2003, they gave an order that what is of utmost importance is to see that food is provided to the aged, infirm, disabled, destitute women, destitute men who are in danger of starvation, and so on, destitute children and so on. Then in para 12, in 2001, they directed Government of India, and at that time it was 1.5 crore families, that we direct Government of India to place on AAY category the following groups of persons: aged, infirm, disabled, destitute men and women, pregnant and lactating mothers, destitute women, widows and other single women with no regular support, old persons with no regular support and no assured means of subsistence, household with a disabled adult and assured means of subsistence, household where due to old age, lack of physical or mental fitness, social customs, need to care for the disabled, and what was then called primitive tribal groups. Even amongst tribal groups, there were those groups which were so-called, which are fortunately now in government jargon are called most vulnerable tribal groups. At that time, they used to be called PTGs, which was seeing a reduction in number. So the court made its intention very clear and said that 35 kilos at this rate to this population. And that's where the matter
35 kilos
ends.
to a household per month.
Per month. And therefore, there is a court order. Now, if you go against the court order, unfortunately, we will see the same drama that we saw during the beginning of the UPA years, when all the entire food policy of this country was being run by the courts. And we were hoping as court commissioners that our role will be eliminated now. You have an act of parliament and government will implement the act. So not only are they not violating the provisions of the Act, which if I may remind you, Girish, and our viewers, this is an Act where when it was introduced, Mr. Narendra Modi, our Prime Minister, wrote to Dr. Manmohan Singh and said that you have to expand the provisions of this Act. This is an Act where the stalwarts of the BJP, Sushma Swaraj, Arun Jaitley, Prakash Javadekar, Murli Manohar Joshi, on the floor of Parliament, if you look at the proceedings, supported the Act to its fullest. So here you have a government, a ministry that is violating the provisions of the Act and violating the provisions of the Supreme Court orders.
One second. Let me get Mr. Parekh. Would you see it as a violation of the Act? You think it is an illegality?
Yes, I think it certainly seems so, because you cannot just say that the list of destitute people would not increase or would not change over time. If, people die, people become old, people become sick, people become destitute by a variety of ways. And so to freeze it in the sense that no new household can be added to it just clearly seems wrong to me. And you must provide that flexibility of adding new households. Now, if you are worried that all people will come under the households, then you must find other ways of checking it. You might say, okay, you can have only X% of the people can be added every year, and so on, and periodically you can have a
review.
Gram Sabha or some other kind of a checking can be done through that. But you cannot really ban adding of the people who become destitute in this. I think to that extent, even if it's not illegal, it's certainly morally wrong.
What I want to say in this is that our objective is food security. We are not saying that we don't want this food security for the citizens of people or the destitute people. Otherwise, this is our scheme. You are all saying, everybody is saying that it was brought by the NDA government. Atalji is a very respected leader of our party. So we are not against that scheme or anything. What is the means of achieving that objective? Slightly, there is a difference in the direction through which we want to achieve that objective.
You are talking of
and we are not further. We are not restricting the schemes.
You are restricting the order is clearly.
If you talk of illegality and what he was saying, that there is an illegality involved, the food security in itself says that you can restrict the reach of this whole scheme, food security scheme. So there is no legality, illegality involved in this.
Antyodaya Anna Yojana in the Act itself is not an open category. It is fixed at 2.5 crore households subject to an upward revision. In the Act itself, it says that these are the numbers given in the schedule. And states have a target, so it's not like anybody can apply and come. I would be very happy to accept Dr. Parekh's definition, and if government expanded it to keep it more flexible.
Sir, but we are not saying
as of now, there is no flexibility. Now, what are you doing?
More thing.
Now, what are you doing?
There is a confusion.
You are eliminating
Just I want to clarify. We are not saying that this is a bad scheme. We want to close it. We are agreeing that this is a good scheme. But in future, what our target is, we want to move to a different direction.
Which is, you see,
otherwise, any scheme will continue to work on the.
One more issue in this. Biraj, is in this order, talking of citizenship, citizens instead of residents. You think that is another major problem?
Yeah, I think politically some of these steps are very problematic, and I'm sure government will review them. I'm sure that these are things which happen by stealth rather than by design, by an overzealous bureaucracy, and that is my interpretation. So I would still be charitable to the BJP and say that government will review it, because the National Food Security Act as well as the Supreme Court orders always use the word resident or person. Now, why did the Act use the word person and not citizen? Because the framers of the Act understand that this is rooted in Article 21 of the Constitution, the right to food, which is the right to life and liberty, which is not restricted to citizenship. The right to life and liberty is enjoyed by everybody. Therefore, benefit should not be restricted to that, and that was one theory. The second reason is that establishment of citizenship for the most vulnerable people is always a problem. So if I am, say, a Muslim, Bengali-speaking Muslim who migrates from Bengal to Delhi, it is virtually impossible for me to get state entitlement because the automatic assumption is that
you're a
I'm
Bangladeshi.
an illegal
No, but
Bangladeshi.
here-
And so on. Now,
yeah,
one second, let me
No,
complete.
even the
Let me
poorest of the poor
talk-
living,
say on something
living in
on
some
this.
remote
When-
tribal area, how do they
Exactly.
establish citizenship?
How do you
No, but
how do you
we are working
in
toward
Bombay?
national population register.
No, these are all-
Ultimately, there
you
is a citizenship and residentship of the state.
No, listen.
I don't know when it will come about. Till then,
NPR
what will
you
happen
have
to
to
the
move
people?
towards
No,
it.
NPR has been happening for 12 years. The question is what happens now. Now,
But ultimately, if you do not put the infrastructure in place, how
then,
will you
then
ensure
put
this?
the infrastructure in
Then
place?
you can-
Otherwise, there will be
Girish,
complete leakages.
One
Yes.
more thing. Now, the Act says that the census figures will be considered, provisional census figures, when you consider the population increase. So, suppose in 2011 there is a census,
There has been a census,
2021,
yes.
there will be another census. Census, the Registrar General of India, they give provisional figures each year. So that as the population increases each year, they give a figure, and the the allocation of resources is according to that figure. Now, what does the PDS control order do? It says, no, we will not consider the provisional figures, we will consider the decadal figures, which means that for 10 years,
You will
the
not want to
families that
change.
are increasing will not be accommodated. Now, this is completely irrational.
Mr. Parekh, two things. One is about the citizenship
Yeah,
thing. One is about the citizenship thing, and other about relying on decadal census figures.
I think since the whole idea is a humanitarian proposal to take care of the poorest of the poor, I don't think we should differentiate between the citizens and non-citizens. After all, our culture says Atithi Devo Bhava. We are always considering that the guest is like a god. Then why differentiate on this small matter people who are not citizens of the country? The second thing is, I think that you say that you change that, you don't adjust for the growing population of the country. That also seems to be irrational to me, because you must really recognize that the country's population is increasing. Of course, you do expect that with economic growth, some people would
Go out of
many
this.
more people will get out of the poverty trap and go out of that, and so that you need to feed less and less people from that point of view. But you should really take a more rational thing. You could say, okay, I am going to account for increase in population, but I will also account for increase in the economic status of people.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Then
Agarwal.
what I want to say is that ultimately, what is the government option? They have to allocate resources to various schemes. If you say that only one scheme should get, ultimately that scheme has been restricted, but the state have been transferred. You are going on 14th Finance Commission. We are taking different steps
This is
for
a
social
central-
security.
This
Ultimately,
This
you
is
cannot
a
move ahead.
completely centrally sponsored scheme.
Yeah,
You cannot
exactly.
you cannot talk of 14th Finance
No, but
Commission.
when you are transferring more resources to the state, where the resources
Okay,
will
now
come?
can I clarify
10%
that? Can I
increase in
clarify that?
resource
No.
allocation. No,
One second, let him
speak.
finish.
When we are allocating resources to different schemes,
See,
there
you
are
have
social...
allocated 10% more, and you are putting a burden of 25% on
Yes,
the
exactly.
states.
We are
if
not taking,
more.
but ultimately there are different new schemes are being implemented. We are talking of social security, Atal pension scheme. We are talking of accidental insurance,
Atal pension
health
scheme,
insurance.
people have to pay for that. Government is not
No,
paying
but
for
it is a very low rate, very subsidized rate.
Well,
Because you are getting a pension of such a good. Ultimately,
Yeah, I am
you
paying
have
for-
to
I am
give a
paying
plan.
the-
Premium. The premium is
for
paid by
it.
the board.
Government is paying not a single pie on it.
No, the
and you're
government is
talking about
contributing in
helping.
Atal pension scheme
No,
equal
you're not
amount.
contributing.
No, government
Anyway.
is contributing.
No, it's not contributing.
No,
Anyway,
government
we
is
are not
contributing
discussing Atal
1,000
pension
rupees
scheme
in
today.
Atal pension scheme. Government is contributing.
How much is it contributing?
Equal to the what the person is doing. 1,000 rupees, subject to the
Let
highest
us,
of the.
anyway, we are not discussing
Girish,
Atal
let me
pension
just say
scheme now.
this.
Yes.
This 10th Finance Commission, I think I should...
14th.
The 14th Finance Commission that Mr. Agarwal is speaking about, I think he's not allowing his lack of knowledge to impede his opinion on this. There are three kinds of schemes. One scheme is where 100% Government of India spending is
Right.
there. The second is where state and Government of India share the total burden. And the third, which has been eliminated. Now, that is the new scheme of things which was announced by the Finance Minister in the budget speech.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, midday meal, for instance, or National Health Mission or SSA, or National Food Security Act, the heavy spending items,
are all
they are
centrally,
all 100% centrally sponsored schemes.
Yeah, we have discussed that.
This logic is not
we
going
have
to work.
discussed that enough on this program. But my question to you, Biraj, is let us assume that the government's intentions are good and that whatever Mr. Agarwal is saying. Why is it that Antyodaya scheme and National Food Security Act have to be separate? Why can't they be merged?
They are actually merged. Antyodaya Anna Yojana is part of the National Food Security Act.
Then what is the problem?
They are violating the Act because the Act does not lay the condition of phasing out.
National Food Security Act also talks of Antyodaya Anna Yojana separately also.
No. The Antyodaya Anna Yojana that we're discussing in the program is a part of the National Food Security Act.
Okay. So that means that the National Food Security Act itself is being
absolutely violated by an executive order, again, by a PDS control order.
Mr. Parekh, when Antyodaya Anna Yojana has become a part of the National Food Security Act, the government department issues an order and says, how legal is that?
Well, I think the National Food Security Act does differentiate between different kinds of people.
Yes.
And therefore, I think it would be really proper to differentiate people who are absolutely destitute and others as well. And I think if you really try to eliminate that differentiation, that is wrong. Yes. And it should not be done.
And what about the issue of
certainly, as I said, how you provide that security is a different story.
How you provide security is a different story. Mr. Agarwal, would you like to react to this?
No,
do you think that this order has been done, has been passed by the government by mistake, or do you think that this is a very well planned out order?
No, I don't think the way which we are talking, this has been planned like that, because ultimately, I think it's an administrative order and it does not reflect the full objective or intentions of the government. If there are some issues which have to be tackled, definitely it will be tackled. Our objective is very clear. We are not against food security of the people. We are
why
for
has it not been implemented yet?
But our overall picture was to go for direct cash transfer.
So until
that steps it has taken. Otherwise, if there is some problem, that definitely.
So Biraj, until the Jan Dhan Yojana and this whole direct cash transfer is put in place, these schemes are going to be effective.
Yes, of course. And you can't say that I will bring Jan Dhan, I will do NPR till such time.
No, but we are not against this scheme.
No, I'm
we
not
are supporting this scheme.
That is not what your order says. So I hope, and as I'm still saying, let me tell Mr. Agarwal that globally today, India is seen as a champion of food security.
Exactly.
Because of the WTO and the NFSA.
And this can damage that.
This damages our reputation. It is counterproductive. You will save 10 or 15 crores a year out of this, 10 crores or less because of this move. And you are, this government is risking not just displeasing a constituency outside, but its own constituency. Because Antyodaya is for the RSS and for the right-wing organizations, it is a concept of Deen Dayal Upadhyay. It is something that was brought about by Mr. Vajpayee.
Okay,
they understand charity much better than rights, which this government is not very enthusiastic about.
I think on that note, we need to end, but we'll wait and watch how the government will react when it has to answer these questions in the parliament in the next session. Till then, we'll hold our opinion about it. Yes, Mr.
Antyodaya was really Mahatma Gandhi's original idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was Mahatma Gandhi's original
Absolutely.
idea.
Okay, sir. On that note, we need to end. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture same time tomorrow.